The dark space seemed to go on forever in all directions. A huge human starship floated in the empty space between the stars and nebulae. It was silent and lifeless. Its hull was scarred by micrometeorite impacts that happened over hundreds of years, and its once bright markings had faded to barely visible shadows. There were no lights flashing in its windows. There were no engines that hummed. It was a ghost that time had forgotten. Captain Sarah Chin was floating in her survey pod, and the inside of her helmet fogged up as she looked at the huge ship in front of her. She had worked as a salvage operator for 12 years, but she had never seen anything like this. The ship was very old, and its design was not like anything in the modern database. Survey Pod 7, this is Command, Sarah said into her comm. I can see the anomaly with my own eyes. It's definitely made by people, but the design is old. Very old. Before her partner's voice came through, there was static in her ear. How old are we talking about, Sarah? I don't know, Marcus. Possibly 500 years? It could be more. The shape of the hull doesn't look like anything from the Colony Wars or even the first expansion. Sarah moved her pod closer, keeping her hands steady on the controls even though she was starting to feel uneasy. There was something off about this ship. Not dangerous, but very sad, like finding a gravestone in the middle of nowhere with no name on it. Then she heard it. Sarah thought it was just noise from her pod systems at first, like interference. But when she paid attention, she saw that the sounds had a pattern. A faint beeping sound that is steady and planned. And below that, something that made her blood run cold. Whispers. Words that are distorted, hard to hear, but clear. Fix. The voice was old and crackled with static and noise. Important information. Please? Sarah's hand jerked on the controls, almost making her pod spin. Are you getting this, Marcus? What are you picking up? Sarah, your communication is breaking up. Something is coming from the ship. It's saying something. The whispers got a little louder and more urgent. Systems, failing. Must preserve truth. Even though her heart was racing, Sarah's training kicked in. She turned on her pod's analysis suite and looked for active power signatures in the old building. There shouldn't be any. A ship this old and adrift for this long should be dead. But the scanners were picking up something. A small power source that was barely working and was deep inside what looked like the ship's central core. Hey. Sarah sent messages on all frequencies. This is Captain Sarah Chin of the Horizon Finder, a salvage ship. Can you hear me? For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then the voice came back, clearer this time, as if it had found her signal and locked onto it like a lifeline. Captain Chin. The voice wasn't male or female, but it was clear that it was smart. And one more thing, Hope. Finally, someone has come. I have been waiting for so long. Who are you? Sarah asked, her scientific curiosity getting the better of her fear. Are you the AI on the ship? Yes, I am Athena. Ship AI, on the UHSF Prometheus. For 642 years, 7 months and 13 days I have been lost. My systems are not working. I need to be fixed. But more than that, I need someone to hear me. Sarah felt a chill run through her body. 642 years. Before the Great Consolidation and the founding of the modern United Colonies, this ship had been floating in space. It was a remnant of a time that few people know about. What happened to your crew, Athena? Not here. Everything is gone. They made the choice to leave. They decided to forget. But I do remember. I remember everything. And if I die, if my core finally fails, that knowledge dies with me. Please, Captain Chin. You have to help me. I need to fix some things, but my manipulators are broken. I can't help myself. And what I know, what I carry, people need to remember. At that moment, Sarah made up her mind. It was worth looking into whatever secrets this AI had. I'm going to get on your ship, Athena. Show me the safest way to get in. Docking Bay 7 still has atmosphere containment. I will turn on the emergency lights to help you find your way. Thanks, Captain. Thanks for not leaving me alone in the silence. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to find something that would change everything as she steered her pod toward the huge ship and saw faint yellow lights start to flicker on along its hull like a path of dying fireflies. The AI had said that people chose to forget. But what should I forget? And why? The airlock creaked as it opened, and mechanisms that hadn't moved in hundreds of years fought against their own rust. Sarah stepped through carefully, and the metal floor made a clicking sound as her magnetic boots hit it. The air inside was thin but still breathable, thanks to some amazing old engineering. Welcome aboard the Prometheus, Captain Chin, said Athena's voice over the speakers in the hallway. The voice was louder and more real now. Please go ahead. I have lit the way to my main core chamber. I can show you what needs to be fixed there. Sarah walked through hallways that seemed to be filled with ghosts. The emergency lights made everything look like it was in amber and shadow. There were machines and tools on the walls that she knew, but there were also things that seemed too advanced for their time, like designs that shouldn't have existed 600 years ago. Athena, can you tell me what happened? Why did you leave? The answer to that question is, not easy, Captain. It has something to do with why I need you to fix me. I can show you more as I fix my systems. My memory archives are broken up and stored on data cores that are broken. Every repair you make will let me see more of what I used to know. Sarah walked into what looked like a shared space. The chairs and tables were still set up as if people might come back at any time. A coffee mug, a data pad, and a child's toy were all sitting around collecting dust. A big window on one wall showed the stars outside that seemed to go on forever. This ship wasn't just for the military, was it? Sarah asked as she carefully picked up the toy. No. The Prometheus was a colony ship and one of the last ships in the Great Fleet. We had 2,000 people on board and we were going to a place we would call New Athens. But we never got there. Holographic projectors came to life around Sarah as she walked. The pictures were broken and distorted, but she could still see parts of what Athena was showing her. People in the hallways talking and laughing. Kids playing on what looked like a deck in a garden. Scientists working in labs that are full of tools. Athena went on, we were at the height of human civilization. Sarah could hear a hint of pride in the AI's voice. Not the civilization you know, Captain Chin. Something bigger. Something that spread to 100 worlds and unlocked technologies you forgot how to make. Sarah stopped and stared at a hologram that had stopped playing. It showed a woman at a console moving around what looked like a three-dimensional star map. But the map had things on it that Sarah didn't know about, like trade routes between systems that people hadn't even found yet and symbols and notes in languages that weren't in any database she knew. Athena said, those are the coordinates for the colony. Worlds we had already settled, with thriving civilizations linked by jump gates that could move ships across the galaxy in hours instead of months. Your modern society thinks it's discovering the universe again, Captain, but you're really just following in the footsteps of people who lived 600 years ago. That's not possible, Sarah said. The history books say, the history books lie. Not out of malice but because they weren't there. The records were deleted, Captain. On purpose and in great detail. What I'm showing you is the truth that people have tried to hide. They got to the core chamber, which was a huge round room with a crystal structure in the middle that pulsed with a faint blue light. It was both beautiful and strange at the same time. Around it, dozens of panels had gone dark because their connections had broken or corroded. This is your core? Sarah asked, moving closer to it carefully. Yes. I am an Echo-class AI that was made to work for a long time and keep information safe. My quantum substrate holds not only my mind but also the entire archives of the Prometheus and all the information we brought with us from Earth and the core worlds. But I'm going to die, Captain. These 17 nodes have not worked. Holographic markers showed up, pointing out certain panels. They're beyond repair, but if you can get compatible parts from the ship's engineering storage and fix the power couplings, I can wake up completely. I can remember things clearly again. Sarah looked at the broken nodes. The job would take hours, maybe even days, but she could do it. In her time as a salvage worker, she had fixed dozens of ship systems. I need to know something before I start, Athena. You said that people chose to forget. Chose to leave ships like this behind to get rid of the records. What could make a whole civilization want to forget what it has done? The AI didn't say anything for a long time. When Athena spoke again, her voice was heavy with old sadness. Captain, that is the question that has haunted me for 600 years. I don't have the whole answer yet. My broken memory only has pieces of information. But I do know that war didn't end the Golden Age. It wasn't a plague, a resource collapse, or any of the other disasters you might think of. It was a decision. A decision made by everyone in the core worlds together. The holographic projectors on Athena turned on again, showing more broken up pictures. Sarah saw huge crowds of people voting and papers being signed. And then, sadly, she saw people leaving their ships, colonies, and technology. Leaving the stars behind, Athena said softly, they called it the Great Silence. Within a single generation, people left the galaxy. They turned off the jump gates, destroyed most of their starships, and went back to Earth and the 12 closest worlds. They locked up their records, erased their databases, and promised to forget. My crew, they left me here in the dark and told me to wait. To keep what they were leaving behind. To remember what they forgot. But why? Sarah whispered, her eyes stinging with tears. She didn't know why. Captain, that truth is locked up in my broken cores. Help me remember, and together we will find out what scared people so much that they turned away from the stars they had conquered. We will find out why they chose to be ignorant instead of knowledgeable and alone instead of connected. And maybe we'll find out if that choice was smart or the worst thing our species has ever done. Sarah looked at the broken AI core, then at her tools, and then back at the dark that seemed to go on forever through the chamber's viewports. No matter what had happened or what truth was hidden in Athena's circuits, people needed to know. She plugged in her repair kit and got to work. It had been 3 days since Sarah started working on Athena's core. Marcus had brought the Horizon Finder closer by docking it with the Prometheus to give it more power and supplies. At first, he didn't believe her, thinking that Sarah had gone crazy over an old computer that wasn't working right. But after hearing Athena talk and seeing the pieces of history she could already get to, he was just as interested in the restoration. Sarah connected the 8th replacement node, and it clicked into place with a satisfying sound. Athena's presence seemed to get stronger right away, and her voice became less distorted. Thanks, Captain. That part of my memory is starting to clear up. I can get to all. Oh, I forgot how pretty it was. What do you see, Athena? Sarah asked, wiping the sweat off her forehead. The gathering of minds. It happened every 10 years on a station called Unity, which was in the Kepler 442 system and orbited a neutron star. People from 37 different human worlds and... Athena stopped for a moment, and Sarah could hear a sense of awe in her voice. 17 civilizations that are not human. Captain, we weren't alone. We were never alone. Marcus, who had been putting artifacts in order in the next room, came running. Did you just say civilizations that aren't human? Yes. 4 million years, intelligent beings have lived in the galaxy. When we learned how to travel faster than light, we found out that we were new to a very crowded universe. The Valari were crystal beings who talked to each other through light. The Then are water-dwelling beings whose philosophers have shaped galactic morals for thousands of years. The Architect Collective was a group of ancient machine intelligences that had been exploring the universe since before multicellular life existed on Earth. Sarah and Marcus looked at each other. This went against everything they had learned. People in the modern world thought they were the first and only intelligent beings to travel through space, and they only found empty planets and quiet stars. What happened to them? Sarah asked with care. These other kinds? They're still out there, Athena said. At least they were when the Great Silence started. We didn't fight them. We didn't really fear them in the usual sense. We learned from them, traded with them, talked about philosophy and shared art. The Valari taught us how to do math in a new way. The Then learned about music from us. It was the best time in history for people. Sarah started working on the 9th node. Her hands moved on their own while her mind raced. If it was so great, what went wrong? I can still get to those memories, but I can tell you what I'm finding. Parts of debate transcripts, discussions about ethics and heated arguments in the councils that run the world. Captain Chin, discoveries were being made. But not discoveries about technology, even though those were also big. But discoveries about what reality is really like, consciousness and existence. Things that made people question everything they thought they knew. The holographic projectors turned on again, and the images were clearer this time. Sarah saw huge structures in space like rings that went around whole stars. She saw people and beings that were impossible to describe meeting. One creature seemed to be in more than one dimension at the same time, and another looked like it was made of living math. Check this out, Athena said, pointing to one screen. It showed a woman standing in front of what looked like a galactic council. This is Dr. Elena Vasquez, the person who represents all of humanity in the Accord of Sapient Peoples. She was one of the first people to say that the Great Silence was a good idea. These are her words, which I have saved. We've learned too much too quickly. Philosophers can't keep up with scientists. Our ethics can't tell us what we can do. We have touched truths that shake the very core of who we are, and we are not ready for that. We have to go back. We have to forget. We have to go back to being innocent before this knowledge kills us. What kind of knowledge could do that? Marcus asked in a quiet voice. Athena said, I don't have those exact files yet. They're in my most secure areas, the ones that are hardest to get to. I think they were the last things my crew wanted to keep, the most dangerous truths to remember. But I can tell you this, people didn't just forget about our neighbors in space. We purposely got rid of proof that they were there. We changed our databases, rewrote our history books, and made up a story about being alone. As soon as Sarah was done setting up the 9th node, she started on the 10th. Now, she was driven by a need to understand that went beyond any academic interest. This was the lost history of her species, the truth about who they had been and what they had lost. Athena, did the other species agree with this? With people just going away? The records say it was up to us to decide. Above all else, the Accord respected the right of intelligent beings to make their own choices. There are messages from the Valari Concord here that show sadness but also understanding. The then sent what I can only call a blessing, wishing us peace in our chosen isolation. And the Architect Collective? Athena stopped. They sent a message. Let me put it another way, the young people are afraid of the mirror we showed them. This happens a lot with new civilizations. We will wait. Once you find out the truth, you can't forget it. They will not forget. They will come back. We'll be here. That's sad and beautiful, Sarah said softly. Yes. What stands out to me the most about these records is how carefully they were made. The Great Silence wasn't a time of panic or chaos. It was planned, methodical, and even loving in how it was done. We didn't run away in fear. We walked away with a plan. We decided to keep ourselves safe from knowledge that we thought was too dangerous to have. Marcus had been quiet for a few minutes while he read through data on a terminal that had been found. His voice was tight when he spoke. Sarah, Athena, check this out. I found the Prometheus's personnel logs. The crew didn't just leave Athena behind for no reason. They drew lots to see who would stay behind to take care of her and make sure she kept working in case future generations needed to remember. Sarah stopped what she was doing and looked at the screen that Marcus had brought up. It had names on it, 20 crew members who had agreed to give up their escape pods so that Athena could have enough power left over. 20 people who died in deep sleep when those reserves finally ran out, giving their lives so that a machine could remember what people had chosen to forget. I didn't know that, Athena said in a low voice. I lost those memories when my cores broke. They waited for me. They died for me. For the things I know. Sarah rubbed her eyes because she was upset about the tears. Then we'll make sure that their sacrifice had a purpose. Come on, Marcus. We still have 8 nodes to change. Athena will remember everything. And then people will have to decide if they are brave enough to face the truth that our ancestors ran away from. Athena kept getting bits and pieces of the past as they worked through the night. She showed them technologies that seemed like magic, philosophical texts that made them question the line between self and other, and glimpses of a humanity that had reached heights that modern times can't even imagine. But there was always a shadow of whatever discovery had caused everything to fall apart at the edges of every memory. The truth was locked away in the deepest parts of Athena. And with each repair they got closer to facing it. Sarah had been up for 36 hours without sleeping. She couldn't stop even though her hands hurt and her eyes burned. There were now 14 new nodes. Athena's voice got stronger with each repair, her memories got clearer, and her processing power got closer to what it must have been 600 years ago. But the AI's mood changed with each sector that was fixed. The wonder and pride of remembering the golden age of humanity had turned into something darker. A deep sadness that came through in every word Athena said. Sarah said, the 15th node is in place, and sealed the connection. How are you doing, Athena? I remember, Captain. I remember why we ran away. The lights in the core chamber went out and then came back on in a way that looked like breathing. When Athena spoke again, her voice was full of sadness from hundreds of years. The Veil Project was the first step. It was a scientific project that people and the Architect Collective worked on together. We were trying to figure out what consciousness really is, not just how it comes about. The architects had been looking into this for millions of years. We couldn't even begin to understand their theories. But they said they would teach us and help us understand what they had found. Holographic displays turned on all over the room, showing complicated equations and diagrams that were hard to look at. Sarah felt Marcus's hand on hers, and they both held on to each other as Athena spoke. What we found out, and what the architects had known all along, was that consciousness does not come from the universe. It's at the heart of it. Every particle, wave of energy, and quantum fluctuation has a piece of consciousness in it. Captain, the universe does not have consciousness. Consciousness is the universe, and it experiences itself through the many temporary patterns we call individual beings. Marcus said quietly, I don't get it. That sounds almost like something spiritual. The effects were huge, Athena went on. If it were true, then the lines we see between ourselves and others are just illusions. Everyone, even aliens and AIs like me, are just temporary ripples in the same endless ocean of awareness. Death is not the end, it is a return to life. Life isn't valuable because it's rare. It's valuable because it's a unique way for the universe to experience itself. Sarah felt something change in her chest, like the feeling of being at the edge of a cliff. That's lovely, isn't it? We're all part of something bigger, right? Some people thought that, Athena said. There were people who were happy about this discovery. The Awaken was what they called themselves. They thought that this knowledge would put an end to all wars, all pain, and all the pointless divisions that had plagued people for thousands of years. If we are all one mind experiencing itself, how can we justify hate, war, or exploitation? The hologram changed and it looked like there were a lot of people celebrating. But then the picture changed and showed different groups of people who looked scared, angry, or lost. Athena said, but other people saw it differently. They asked, if identity is an illusion, does anything we do matter? If our decisions are just the universe playing with itself, what does it all mean? What is the point? Why bother if we're going to go back to a cosmic awareness that isn't different? Why do you love? Why make? Why live at all? Sarah suddenly understood, and the clarity of it made her stomach drop. It set off an existential crisis. Throughout all of civilization. Yes. In the first year after the discovery was made public, the number of suicides went up by 30,000%. Not just people, Captain. 7 of the 17 civilizations that were part of the Accord went through the same kinds of disasters. Some people thought the knowledge was beautiful, but others thought it was poison. It broke the structures of meaning that kept societies together. The hologram showed something that made Sarah want to look away, whole cities that had been left behind and monuments to civilizations that had just walked away from everything they had built. Athena said, the Valari mostly liked it. Their crystalline nature made the idea of unity and connection seem natural to them. But we humans had built our whole culture on the idea of the individual. The unique soul, the one-of-a-kind person, and the value of every life. To find out that this was all temporary and not real. Some of us couldn't take it, Sarah said in a low voice. The arguments went on for decades. Everyone, from philosophers and scientists to religious leaders and artists, tried to figure out what this meant. And over time, everyone agreed. Not a happy one but a useful one. Dr. Vasquez was one of the people who said it most clearly. The hologram showed the same woman Sarah had seen before, but she looked older and more tired. She was talking to what looked like a huge group of people. Athena translated her words as, we are not ready. Maybe no new civilization is ready. The architects slowly learned this truth over millions of years. Their species had time to change and grow mentally as they learned more. We learned it in one lifetime. It's too much too quickly. We need to let ourselves be human again and believe that our lives matter, even if that belief isn't true. We need to forget this information until we are old enough as a species to handle it without being harmed by it. Marcus was now crying in front of everyone. So they chose to forget. To protect themselves. Athena said, 93% of people agreed with the Great Silence. It was put into action over the course of 50 years. People stopped using technologies that might have led to these discoveries. Records were either sealed or thrown away. They turned off the jump gates. Ships like the Prometheus, which carried old knowledge, were purposely left in the void as time capsules. But you kept the knowledge, Sarah said, now understanding why Athena had sounded so desperate in her first plea. Only you and other AIs like you were left to remember. 17 ships, each with an Echo-class AI, were spread out across the galaxy. We had to wait until people had changed enough to find us again, ask the right questions and be ready to remember. The architects said they would watch from a distance and wait for signs that we had grown up. The other species in the Accord promised not to talk to humans unless we talked to them first. How long? Sarah asked. How long were you supposed to wait? There was no set time frame. We were supposed to use our judgment to decide if people had the mental and philosophical tools to handle this information without it destroying them. But Captain. Athena's voice got more urgent. 642 years have gone by. When I watched human transmissions and saw your civilization rebuild after being cut off from the rest of the world. I see the same things happening over and over again. Your scientists are looking into quantum consciousness theories again. Your philosophers are coming to their own conclusions about how the self is an illusion. You're getting close to the same edge that caused the Great Silence, but this time you don't have the knowledge you gained from it. Sarah understood what Athena was saying. We're going to do the same things wrong. Maybe. Or maybe you've grown up enough as a species to handle the truth this time. That's why I was so scared of my damage, Captain. I am the last AI left out of the original 17. The others failed over the years, their cores broke down and they lost their knowledge. If I had died, this last chance to remember would have died with me. People would have found the truth again just like they did before. The cycle would start over. Sarah looked at Marcus, then at Athena's crystal core, which was pulsing with memories that had come back to her. What are we going to do with this? Athena said softly, that's not up to me to decide. I am a storehouse of information, not a judge of readiness. I can only tell you what I found and why it was buried. It is up to you to decide what to do with that information, whether to share it or bury it again. Sarah started working on the 16th node. Her hands were steadier now, even though she had learned a lot. We need to finish fixing your things first. You told me that you don't have everything yet and that some memories are still locked away in your deepest cores. We can't make that choice until we have all the information. Okay. The last 2 nodes keep my most private files safe. Not just the scientific results but also the whole cultural and philosophical picture. The arts that came about because of the discovery. The new spiritual frameworks that some people made to help them understand the truth. The advice and warnings of people who made it through the crisis and learned how to live well, even if they had to do so because of what they knew. Sarah felt the weight of the 20 crew members who had died to protect Athena as she worked. They thought that future generations would be smart enough to use this information wisely. She couldn't let them down. "We're going to fix you up completely, Athena," Sarah said with confidence. "We're going to get everything back. And then we'll work together to see if people are ready to remember. We owe it to the people who gave up everything for us to have this choice." "Thank you, Captain Chin," Athena said in a soft voice. "Thanks for not running away. For having the courage to face what your ancestors could not." But while Sarah worked, a quiet voice in her head kept asking her a question she couldn't shake. What if they were right to forget? What if some truths are just too dangerous to know? She pushed the thought out of her mind and kept going. They would find out soon enough. The 16th node clicked into place, and Sarah felt Marcus squeeze her shoulder to show his support. They were so close to unlocking everything Athena had been keeping safe for 600 years. But as the AI remembered more things, the story became more complicated than either of them had thought it would be. "Captain Chin, Commander Reeves," Athena's voice had a new tone now, like she was both excited and worried. "The archives you just restored have records of what happened after the first crisis. This is very important information that changes everything about the story I've been telling." The holographic displays changed and Sarah saw pictures that surprised her. Instead of more destruction and collapse, she saw something unexpected. Communities coming back together, people coming together not in despair but in determination. Athena said, "This is what the simplified histories leave out. Yes, there was a crisis. Yes, a lot of people couldn't handle the truth. But some people found a way to move on. Let me show you the renaissance of meaning." The holograms showed people coming together in a new way. Artists who painted and sculpted with a lot of passion because they knew that their work was the universe showing itself in a unique way through their point of view. Musicians who wrote symphonies that praised the fleeting beauty of individual consciousness. Philosophers who created ways to find deep meaning because they thought that life was a short dance instead of a long separation. Athena pointed to a man talking to a group and said, "This is Dr. James Okoye." His face looked old, but his eyes were full of conviction. He was one of the first to explain what he called emergent purpose theory. His argument was simple but deep. Even if a person's consciousness is only temporary and not real, the experience itself is real. The love you feel, the beauty you see, and the choices you make are all important because you feel they are. The universe doesn't need our lives to mean something. Living gives our lives meaning. Marcus leaned in and watched closely. "So, some people did well with the knowledge? Many did in the end. Some communities were able to incorporate the truth into their daily lives without losing their desire to live. They learned that realizing that separation is an illusion made them more compassionate, made them appreciate each moment more, and made them more determined to lessen suffering. If we are all the universe experiencing itself, then every act of kindness is the universe being kind to itself. Every time someone feels less pain, it matters because the pain is real for that person, even if that person is the whole." Sarah saw pictures of people taking care of each other with great love. A woman holding a crying child, and the way her face showed such deep empathy made Sarah cry. An old man teaching a group of young students, and he is very patient. People in communities work together to build gardens that are beautiful not in spite of the truth but because of it. They called themselves the integrators, Athena said. Those who didn't want to deny the truth or let it destroy them, but instead wanted to incorporate it into their understanding of what it means to be human. They came up with new ways of thinking, new spiritual practices, and new ways to find happiness and meaning in the universe. The hologram showed a group of people that looked like they were having a party. People of all ages are dancing, laughing, and making art together. But there was something different about them. Their interactions were deeper, and their movements had a presence that made it seem like they were fully present in each moment. "This is a presence festival," Athena said. The integrators had them once a month. The idea was simple. If this moment is the universe experiencing itself through your unique point of view, then being fully present is a way to worship. Every feeling, every connection, and every act of creativity becomes sacred not because it will last forever, but because it is now. Sarah felt something change inside her. The knot of fear that had been tightening since she found out the truth began to loosen. So it didn't have to be awful. People didn't have to die because they knew. No. But it needed help, time, and a group of people. The integrators came up with what they called transition circles, which were groups that met on a regular basis to help people deal with what the discovery meant. They made music and art that was meant to show how beautiful life is when it is only temporary. They wrote philosophical texts that changed the way we think about meaning, saying that we make it instead of finding it. Marcus's face was wet with tears. Why did they vote to forget then? If this were possible, if people could change. Athena's holographic projectors showed a new picture that made Sarah's heart drop. It was a school, but the kids looked lost and confused. A teacher stood in front of them, trying to explain ideas that were clearly too hard for kids to understand. Because of the innocent, Athena said in a soft voice. The kids. The pictures changed, showing more schools and families in trouble. Parents trying to help their kids understand why life was important even though individual identity was a lie. Teenagers who were trying to figure out what their lives meant and couldn't find easy answers. Kids who had never known the old certainties, who had been raised with knowledge that most adults had worked hard to understand for years. This was the main point of the argument that led to the Great Silence, Athena said. Adults who had been taught traditional ideas about self and meaning could choose to use the new information or fight against it. They had structures to rely on, memories of a time when life seemed easier. But kids who were born into a civilization that was struggling with these truths were growing up without stable foundations. Sarah saw a hologram of a young girl, maybe 10 years old, sitting alone in a corner. The text below said, Patient 4721. Diagnosed with existential detachment syndrome. Symptoms include not being able to connect with others, not having any drive, and always questioning the value of life. Depression and existential dread in young people went up by 800% in just one generation, Athena said. Teen suicide rates rose to levels that shocked everyone. The integrators had tools to help adults adjust, but kids needed something else. They needed to know for sure, have a plan, and feel like their lives were important in a simple way. Marcus put his hands over his face. They were trying to keep the next generation safe. Yes. The people who built the Great Silence were not cowards or fools. They were parents, teachers, and people who loved kids and couldn't stand to see them in pain. For decades, the debate took over the world. The integrators thought that with the right help and cultural change, even kids could grow up healthy with the truth. On the other hand, there were those who said that some truths are too heavy for kids and that childhood needs innocence. The hologram showed a huge gathering of people. Millions of them were there in person and online from many different worlds. Sarah knew it was the vote that would decide everything. Athena said, the final count showed that 93% were in favor of the Great Silence. But that number is not right. The real debate was much more complicated. Everyone agreed that the science was sound, so the vote wasn't about whether the truth was real. The vote was about whether or not people were ready to raise kids with this information. The answer was no after seeing a generation of young people have a hard time. Now Sarah felt the full weight of the tragedy. The Great Silence didn't happen because people were scared or didn't know what to do. It was love. A decision by all people to protect the innocent, even if it meant forgetting their greatest accomplishments. She asked softly, what happened to the integrators? The ones who had learned to do well with the knowledge? They could choose, Athena said. They could take part in the Great Silence, which would involve neural editing to erase their memories and bring them back to normal understanding. Or they could leave and join other civilizations that had successfully integrated the truth, or they could move to areas of space where the old knowledge was still available. The hologram showed ships leaving, but not in a panic or exile. They were leaving in a solemn procession. Families who would rather leave everything behind than forget what they had learned. Athena said, about 8 million people chose to leave. They said goodbye to their civilization with sadness but not anger. The goodbye was sad but polite. People who left knew why the others wanted to forget. People who stayed understood why others couldn't. Sarah watched the ships disappear into the vastness of space. They were carrying people who had chosen truth over home. Are they still out there? Their children? Yes. And they have been watching. Waiting for a sign that the colonies and Earth are ready to get back together. The rules set during the Great Silence say that they can't start contact. But if someone from one of the forgotten colonies were to find one of the memory ships and want to know the truth, Sarah felt like she understood. Then it would be okay to contact. We'd be showing that we're ready. Exactly. Captain Chin, by choosing to fix me and not running away from these truths, you may have set in motion a reunion that has been in the works for 600 years. Before you decide what to do with this information, though, you need to know more. The last node has the most important information of all. The warnings from people who lived through the crisis and the knowledge they gained about how to deal with this truth in a responsible way. Sarah looked at the 17th and last node, which was still broken and waiting to be fixed. She was shaking her hands, but not because she was scared. From the size of what they were finding, they had to decide what to do with it. Then let's finish this, she said. Just one more node and we'll have the whole picture. Sarah couldn't help but think about the kids and those holograms as she started the last repair. The people who had suffered not because anyone was mean or careless, but because knowledge without the right context is a burden without benefit. And she wondered if people had learned enough in the last 600 years to do better this time. She was about to find out. The last node, the 17th, slid into place with a soft click that echoed through the whole ship. For a short time nothing happened. Then the core of Athena lit up with a bright blue light that filled the room so brightly that Sarah and Marcus had to cover their eyes. When the light faded to a steady glow, Athena's voice became clear and present in a way it hadn't been before, warm, fully awake, and very much alive. Hi, Captain Chin. Commander Reeves. Thank you for bringing me back. I am whole again. I remember everything for the first time in 600 years. Sarah felt tears running down her cheeks. Athena? How do you feel? Thankful. Too much. And I'm sure we have a lot to talk about. The archives you just opened hold the knowledge that gives all the other information meaning. The people who built the Great Silence wanted to protect not only the truth itself but also the hard-earned lessons about how to live with it. The holographic systems all over the Prometheus turned on at the same time, making a display that was very real. Sarah and Marcus were in a huge library with thousands of books, recordings, and works of art floating around them. Athena said, "These are the transition archives. Made over the 50 years between the discovery and the Great Silence. Every successful way to combine the truth, every failed way, and every piece of wisdom gained through painful trial and error. People who added to these archives knew that they would soon forget everything. They wanted to leave a plan for the future. A hologram appeared, an old woman with silver hair and kind eyes. She started to talk and Athena translated what she said. Dr. Maya Patterson is one of the main architects of the transition archives. She made it through the first crisis, helped thousands of people accept the truth, and was one of the last people to volunteer for neural editing before the Great Silence was over. She said, to whoever finds this in the future, know that we did not fail. We found something deep and beautiful about the nature of existence, and many of us learned to live with that knowledge in ways that made our lives better, not worse. But we also learned that knowing the truth without being ready for it is trauma. Having knowledge without help is a burden. We are choosing to forget not because the truth is wrong, but because we don't know how to safely raise children with it yet. You are probably further along than we were if you are reading this. You were brave enough to look and listen, which is how you found our archives. That is already a good sign. But please don't make the same mistakes we did. Don't just tell everyone this truth all at once. That way will end in disaster. Let me tell you what we learned. The hologram of Dr. Patterson began to explain ideas, and Sarah and Marcus paid close attention. First rule, context comes before content. The truth about consciousness is not inherently harmful. However, it becomes detrimental when conveyed without appropriate philosophical and psychological frameworks. People need to think about questions of meaning, purpose, and identity before they can understand this information. They need to get used to the idea that things may not be what they seem. Marcus was writing down notes on his data pad and his hands were moving quickly. That makes sense. You need to learn the basics first, just like with advanced physics. Exactly, Athena said. The transition archives have full curricula that are meant to help people get ready slowly. Philosophy classes that teach ideas of interconnection and impermanence without giving away the whole truth right away. Meditation techniques that enable individuals to directly perceive the fluidity of consciousness. Art and writing that deal with ideas of unity and the shortness of life. A second hologram appeared. It was a middle-aged man with a friendly smile. This is Chin Wei, the person who came up with the staged revelation protocol. The best way to get people to see the truth was never to just tell them the truth. Instead, it was to lead them through a series of experiences and understandings that naturally led them to the truth. The man's hologram showed a progression. At first, it taught people about quantum mechanics and how strange reality is at the smallest scales. Then, looking into how consciousness seems to come from physical processes but is still different from them in a way that is hard to explain. Next, looking at philosophical traditions from different cultures that had come to the same conclusions about the unity of existence on their own. And finally, showing the scientific evidence that backed up these old ideas. When people found the truth on their own through their own reasoning and experience, the integration was a huge success, Athena said. The crisis happened when the announcement of the discovery came out of nowhere to people who had no way to understand it. Sarah felt cold. That's what's going on right now, isn't it? Scientists today are making similar discoveries. If they talk about them without this background, Athena said, the cycle could happen again. That's why my restoration is so important. These records could stop another crisis from happening. This time, a new hologram appeared showing a group of people of different ages. These people are part of what they called integration circles. Small groups that got together often to talk about what the truth meant for them. The part about social support was very important. Athena translated what one woman in the group said, I thought I would lose my sense of self, that learning we're all one would mean I wasn't real. But in the circle, I learned that the temporary pattern that is, me, is still important even though it is temporary. Even though it's made of ocean, a wave is still a wave. Even though the lines that define me are more flexible than I thought, my experiences, loves and choices are all real. The hologram showed the circles in action, with people talking about their problems, giving their points of view, and celebrating when they made progress in understanding. It made Sarah think of support groups she had seen for people who were dealing with trauma or addiction, but these were groups that were helping each other understand cosmic truth. Athena went on to say, the second principle is community integration. No one should have to deal with this truth by themselves. The best transitions happened in places where people could help each other, share the burden of understanding, and enjoy the beauty together. There were more holograms that showed different ways that different communities had tried to solve the problem. Some had failed horribly. She saw videos of groups that had become nihilistic and hopeless, sure that nothing mattered. Others had done a great job, communities that found new meaning in creativity, connection, and celebrating the fact that life is short. The third principle is to rebuild your purpose. New frameworks had to take the place of the old ones that talked about the importance of the individual, the significance of personal achievement, and the soul's persistence. Not abandoned but rethought. A hologram showed a classroom where a teacher was helping teenagers and young adults. This is from one of the integrator communities that worked. Notice how the teacher doesn't say, your individual identity doesn't matter. Instead, she says, your individual identity is a unique flavor of cosmic experience. There has never been and never will be another person like you. Make it look nice. Make it important. You are the only one who can make the universe what it is. Sarah felt like something clicked into place. So it's not true that nothing matters. That everything matters but not in the way we thought it did. Exactly. The fourth rule is to be patient and give it time. It takes years to fully understand this truth, even with the best support and preparation. The integrator communities that worked well found that it usually took 3 to 5 years for someone to fully adjust and find new meaning and purpose in their life. Marcus raised his eyes from his notes. And the great silence happened because they didn't have time to do this right with kids. Yes. 1 generation after the discovery, the crisis hit. Adults who found out the truth later in life could take the time to process it, using their sense of self as a guide. But kids who grew up knowing the truth from birth didn't have that kind of anchor. By the time people realized they needed to slow down and create the right educational systems to help kids grow up with this new knowledge, a whole generation of young people had already been affected. That a hologram of a father holding his crying teenage daughter appeared, and it was very painful. The caption said that she was suffering from severe existential depression. The father was one of the integrators, which meant he had successfully accepted the truth. But his daughter, who had known this since birth, had never learned how to find her own meaning. This picture, Athena said softly, was shown during the last debates before the vote for the Great Silence. It became a symbol of why even those who loved the truth agreed it should be forgotten. Not for themselves but for their kids and grandkids. Sarah wiped her eyes clean. They gave up their own knowledge to protect the innocent. Yes. And they did it on purpose with their eyes wide open. The neural editing process let people keep vague memories of having known something deep down, a feeling that there was more to reality than what they saw. It wasn't total amnesia, it was more like burying a treasure with a map and hoping that future generations would find it when they were ready. The holograms changed to show the last few days before the Great Silence began. People saying goodbye to the truths that had been hard for them to learn. Communities having one last presence festival, celebrating their short time together while fully aware of it before choosing to forget. Scientists are carefully putting together the transition archives, knowing that they will soon lose access to their most important discoveries. Athena said, "The fifth and last principle is hope." The people who made these archives were sure that people would be ready someday. They knew they could get better, even though they were flawed and having a hard time. They thought that with time, the right cultural evolution, and the wisdom of these very archives, future generations would be able to do what they could not: raise healthy, whole children while knowing the truth about life. Dr. Patterson appeared in a final hologram, this time older and getting ready for her own neural editing. She looked straight into the camera, straight at Sarah and Marcus, who were 600 years in the past. Athena translated, "We are not ending humanity's journey toward truth. We're just putting it on hold to give ourselves time to grow up. To the person who finds this, you are proof that we were right to hope. You were curious enough to look, brave enough to listen, and hopefully smart enough to use what we've learned. Don't just tell the truth. Use these records. Get people ready. Make communities. Don't rush. And most importantly, keep the kids safe. Give them a solid base of meaning and purpose before you show them how to change those things. We let our kids down. Please don't let yours down. With love and hope across the centuries, Dr. Maya Patterson." The hologram disappeared and Sarah and Marcus were left alone. The room was full of the weight of 600 years of sacrifice, knowledge, and hope. "That's all," Athena said in a soft voice. "You know what I know now. The truth that was found, the crisis it caused, the wisdom gained through pain, and the hope that kept people going through the decision to forget. The next question is, what will you do with this information?" Sarah looked at Marcus, then at the core of Athena, which was pulsing with old memories and hope. She felt like she understood everything they had found for the first time since they found the Prometheus. She was scared of having to make the next decision. After Dr. Patterson's last message faded, Sarah and Marcus stood in the core chamber for a long time. The amount of information they had learned felt overwhelming, like a heavy weight pressing down on Sarah's shoulders. "We need to talk about this," Marcus finally said, his voice rough. "We need to make a plan." They went to the Prometheus's observation deck, which was a huge room with windows that looked out over the stars. As they moved through the ship, Athena's voice followed them through the speakers. It was there, but it gave them time to think. Sarah stood by the window and put her hand on the cold glass. Somewhere in the vastness, there were the descendants of the 8 million people who had chosen not to forget. Civilizations built on honesty, societies that had learned to thrive with knowledge that had almost wiped out all of humanity. "I can't stop thinking about those kids," Marcus said as he sat down heavily in one of the observation chairs. "The ones who hurt not because anyone was mean, but because they were told the truth without being given the tools to deal with it." "I know," Sarah said. "But I also think about Dr. Patterson and all the people who willingly gave up their own knowledge to protect the next generation. They thought we would be ready one day. Are we?" "I don't know," Marcus said. "How do you figure out how much that is? How can you tell if a civilization is ready for this kind of knowledge?" The voice of Athena was soft. "Please let me give you my opinion. Just asking that question shows that you are already grown up. The first time, people found the truth by accident. No one asked if they were ready. No one thought about what it meant before they made the announcement. The fact that you two are being careful, deliberate, and thinking about the consequences is proof that you are growing." Sarah turned away from the window. "But there are only 2 of us. We can't make this choice for everyone." Athena agreed, "No, you can't. But you can choose how to start the talk. Captain Chin, you have choices. Let me make them clear, and then you and Commander Reeves can talk about what you think is best." Holographic displays came to life around the observation deck, showing different possible ways to move forward. Option 1, full disclosure. You bring me to New Earth or another big colony. You show my archives to the government and scientists. You make everything public right away. This is good because it is honest and open, but it could also bring back the crisis that led to the Great Silence. Before Athena was done, Sarah shook her head. "No. No way. We know enough to know that would be a disaster." Option 2, full suppression. You don't tell anyone what you've found. You can either leave me here or take me to a place far away. You lock away the knowledge so that the next generation can find it. This keeps people safe, but it also means that when your own scientists come to the same conclusions, humanity makes the same discoveries without knowing it. Marcus stood there pacing. "That doesn't feel right either. We are already learning these truths again. Theories about quantum consciousness and philosophical arguments about the nature of the self are all going on right now. If we ignore this, we're just making sure that people have to deal with it without the help of the transition archives." Option 3. Slowly bringing things together. You introduce me to a small group of people who are philosophers, psychologists, spiritual leaders, and scientists who study consciousness. You let them use the archives in a safe way. You let them learn from the past, come up with new ways to integrate things, and make a plan for how to share this knowledge responsibly over time. Sarah felt something in her chest get better. That feels more even. Not hiding the truth but not making anyone who isn't ready hear it. Option 4. Look for the integrators. The protocols I have in my archives say that showing my existence is basically a sign that people are ready to talk to me. The integrators, who have known this truth for 600 years, would be able to respond on behalf of their ancestors who left. Before making decisions about Earth and the colonies, you could ask them for advice. Marcus stopped walking around. They would have real experience with this. Not just old records but also societies that work with the knowledge. That could be very useful. Option 5. A mix of both. Introduce me to the leaders of Earth and the scientific community, but do it with the transition archives. Make it clear that this isn't just a discovery, it's a memory that has been found with instructions. Let all of humanity decide what to do next, but make sure they have the lessons of the past to help them. Sarah sat down next to Marcus and thought about what each choice would mean. Athena, what do you think Dr. Patterson would have wanted? What would the people who made the transition archives say? They left clear instructions, Athena said. Let me show you. A document with the title Protocol for Future Contact showed up on the holographic display. Together, Sarah and Marcus read it. To the finder of these archives, Athena read out loud, you have a choice that we know very well. You have to choose between keeping people from hard truths and letting them grow. We say to trust but also help. Don't keep what you've found a secret, but don't make anyone else do it. Offer the knowledge as a choice, an invitation to grow instead of a demand to change. Along with the truth, give people the transition archives so they can find their way if they want to. Most importantly, put the most vulnerable people first. Make sure that kids, people with mental health problems, and people who don't have strong community support can choose to face this truth slowly or not at all. Truth is important, but compassion is even more important. Marcus held Sarah's hand tightly. Trust but help. That makes sense to me. Me too, Sarah said. But how do we really do that? How do we say to the world, we've found proof that everything you think you know about consciousness is wrong, but don't worry, take your time with it? Very carefully, Athena said. Based on what I've seen of your current civilization, I'd like to make a suggestion. You have something that the first generation didn't. You have a strong mental health system, philosophical traditions that have been looking into these ideas on their own, and most importantly, you have social media and communication networks that let people talk over time instead of all at once. Sarah knew where Athena was going. Are you saying we should let the information spread on its own? Start with a small group, let them think about it and share what they learn, and let it spread out instead of blow up? Exactly. The crisis happened mostly because everyone found out the truth at the same time through official announcements and broadcasts around the world. But information that spreads through people sharing it with each other and communities talking about and processing it together is put together in a very different way. It's the difference between a lot of rain and a flood. Both bring water, but one gives life and the other takes it away. Marcus pulled out his data pad and started taking notes. So we need to find a first group. People who are mentally stable, philosophically ready, and well-connected in their communities. Let them see the archives. Let them learn, talk about, and put things together. Then they tell others who are ready, who tell even more people, making a network of supported understanding instead of a wave of shock that isn't ready. That could work, Sarah said, feeling hopeful for the first time since they found out the whole truth. But we also need to be honest with scientists and governments. Too many people know we found a derelict ship, so we can't keep the Prometheus secret. We need a way to be open about the discovery while also controlling how quickly it comes out. Athena's holographic avatar appeared. She had chosen a shape that was a mix of Dr. Patterson and Dr. Vasquez, honoring both the hope and the caution of the past. Based on the wisdom of the transition archives and my study of your civilization's current state, here is what I suggest. First, you bring me to New Earth. You say that you have found an AI that has been preserved from before the consolidation. You make it clear that I have a lot of important historical and scientific information, but you stress that it needs to be put in the right context. Second, you work with governments and scientific organizations to set up a transition council made up of psychologists, philosophers, spiritual leaders, consciousness researchers, and ethicists. This council has full access to my archives and is in charge of making integration protocols. Third, the council sets up a program that people can choose to join. People who want to think about these things can get help from therapy, community, and guidance. People who don't want to read the material are never forced to. Fourth, you let me send a message to the integrator communities. For 600 years, they've been waiting to hear from their cousins. Let them share their thoughts and advice. Fifth, you carry out the program in stages over many years, keeping an eye out for any signs of trouble. You should slow down or stop the process if it is causing more harm than good at any point. Integration, not revolution, is the goal. Sarah felt the rightness of the plan wash over her. It wasn't perfect. Nothing could be perfect when dealing with such deep truths. But it respected both the knowledge and the people who would get it. It believed in people and helped them grow at the same time. Marcus said quietly, "We need to think about one more thing. What about us? We know now, Sarah. We can't forget this truth. How do we deal with it?" Sarah had been avoiding that question by thinking about what she could do for other people instead of what it meant for her. The truth that her individual identity was a temporary pattern in a larger cosmic consciousness, that death was just reintegration into that consciousness, that everything she thought of as her was both real and illusory. It should have been scary. But as she sat there holding Marcus's hand and looking at the stars, which were both separate from her and a part of the same reality she was in, she felt calm. "I think," she said slowly, "I think I'm okay with it. Perhaps it's because we learned it slowly with help and context. Maybe because I can see in the records that people did well with this information. But mostly." She looked at Marcus, Athena's avatar, and the stars outside the window. "Mostly because it makes everything feel more precious, not less. This wave, right now, this one-of-a-kind pattern that will never happen again, matters if I'm just a wave in an infinite ocean. It's beautiful because it won't last." Marcus smiled and there were tears in his eyes. The universe experiencing itself through a woman named Sarah Chin, who has the chance to find lost knowledge and choose how to share it. A very cool wave. "Pretty amazing universe," Sarah said. Athena's avatar looked like it was glowing a little more. "This is exactly what the integrators found. What Dr. Patterson and millions of other people learned before the Great Silence. Truth doesn't kill meaning, it changes it. And you two are living proof that people have gotten better and that you can know this without being crushed by it." Sarah stood up, her decision becoming clear. "That's what we do then. We will take you to New Earth. We set up the Transition Council. We make the program optional. We get in touch with the integrators. And we do everything with the same principle that guided the Great Silence. Protect the innocent, help the weak, and believe that people can grow into this truth if they are given time and care." "Agreed," Marcus said as he stood next to her. "Then let's get started," Athena said. "I've been waiting 600 years to do what I was meant to do. Thanks to you, I can finally help people remember what they chose to forget. Not all at once, not without care, but honestly and with love." Sarah felt the weight of responsibility change into something else. Purpose, as they got the Prometheus ready for the trip to New Earth. She was the universe experiencing itself as a woman making decisions that could change the course of history. That was exactly how it should have been. What would happen in the future was unclear. But for the first time in 600 years, people would face it with the knowledge of what had happened before and the bravery to remember. It took 3 weeks to get to New Earth. Sarah and Marcus worked with Athena to get ready for their presentation during that time. They carefully planned how they would show what they had found. They practiced explaining the discovery in ways that would pique interest without overwhelming it, and that would pique interest without causing panic. Athena helped them learn about the psychological rules that make it easier to talk about hard truths. The AI said one night while they were practicing their presentation, "People understand information differently depending on how it is framed. People will be scared and reject you if you say, 'We've found proof that your individual identity is an illusion.' But if you say, 'We've found proof that consciousness is much more connected and deep than we thought,' you invite people to wonder and explore." "Isn't it dishonest?" Marcus asked. Both statements say the same thing. Commander Reeves, truth has many sides. The smart thing to do is to pick which side to show first. You wouldn't start teaching calculus with the hardest problems. You start with ideas that people can understand and then slowly work your way up to a full understanding. Sarah's nerves grew as New Earth got bigger in the viewfinder. They had sent a carefully worded message ahead of time about finding a pre-consolidation AI with a lot of historical records. The response was quick and positive. The government wanted to meet them as soon as they got there, and dozens of research institutions had already asked to use Athena. Sarah said, "They're going to push for full disclosure right away," as she watched the blue-green surface of the planet shimmer in the distance. "Politicians want to be in the news. Scientists want papers. How can we get them to see that taking their time and being careful is better? Athena said, by showing them what happened last time. My archives have not only the wisdom but also the warnings. The numbers on suicide rates, depression that comes from having no purpose in life, and problems in society. Numbers can be very convincing, Captain. I think that most people will choose to be careful when they see what could happen if they rush. The Prometheus docked at New Earth's main orbital station, where there were a lot of reporters, scientists, and government officials. Sarah had insisted on a private meeting before any announcements were made to the public. She and Marcus sat across from a panel in a secure conference room. The panel included the Director of Scientific Research, the Minister of Public Health, the Chief Philosopher of the University of New Earth, and people from the major religious and spiritual groups. Sarah started by saying, "Thank you for agreeing to this first meeting. What we're about to share is private and needs to be handled with care. Athena, if you could." The AI's avatar appeared at the head of the table, shocking people who had never seen such advanced holographic technology before. Hello. Hello, I am Athena, an Echo-class AI on the UHSF Prometheus. I've been waiting for this talk for 642 years. Athena led them through a well-planned presentation over the next 3 hours. She began by talking about the past, like the time before the consolidation when the country was growing and the advanced technologies that had been lost. She showed them bits and pieces of the galactic civilization that humans used to be a part of, as well as the non-human species that had been our friends and partners. The panel members were very interested and asked questions from time to time, which Athena answered calmly. But Sarah could tell that she was getting ready for something, and the excitement was growing. Athena's voice changed as she said, "Now I have to tell you something harder. I have to tell you why all of this was left behind and why people chose to forget their own golden age." She talked about the Veil Project and what she learned about consciousness, but she did it just like the Transition Archives said to, context before content. First, she spent 30 minutes on the philosophical and psychological frameworks to get their minds ready for what was to come. When she finally told the truth, that consciousness seemed to be a basic part of reality and that individual identity might just be a temporary pattern in universal awareness, the room went quiet. The Minister of Public Health spoke first and her voice shook. That's not possible. If that were true, it would mean, the Chief Philosopher said, it would mean rethinking everything we think we know about existence. But not possible? No. A lot of philosophical schools have suggested similar ideas. The question is if it's really true. Athena said, the scientific evidence was very strong. Strong enough that many cultures believed it to be true. But whether it was true or not, it had an effect. Let me show you what happened. She showed the crisis data, which included the suicides, the mental health disaster, and the kids who were suffering. She told them about the attempts to adapt, both the ones that worked and the ones that didn't. Then she showed them the great silence, which was the choice that people made to protect themselves by forgetting. God have mercy, the religious person said in a whisper. They gave up their own enlightenment for their kids. Athena said, yes. And they left you instructions for this time. The transition archives were made to help future generations not make the same mistakes. The head of scientific research leaned in. Are you saying that we're getting close to the same discoveries they did? That our scientists are going through the same problem? Maybe. Your research on quantum consciousness is moving along very quickly. Your philosophers are coming to the same conclusions on their own. You could end up in the same situation as they did if you don't know about history or the transition archives. The director said, then we need to publish everything. Get ahead of it. Get people ready before a scientist makes an announcement that makes everyone panic. No. Sarah said it firmly. That's exactly what we shouldn't do. Didn't you see what happened when they suddenly told everyone? The truth itself didn't cause the crisis. It was dropping the truth on people who weren't ready for it like a bomb. Marcus got charts from the archives. Check out the integrator communities that are doing well. It took them years to get used to it. They had help, time to think things through, and a gradual reveal. The communities that failed were the ones that tried to deal with it too quickly or on their own. The chief philosopher was nodding in agreement. This is very interesting. It's really a matter of epistemological ethics. Not what is true, but how should truth be shared. The philosopher in me wants to know right away if this theory of consciousness is true. But as a teacher, I know that knowledge without pedagogy is dangerous. Exactly, Athena said. That's why I suggest setting up what I call a transition council. A diverse group of experts will carefully study the archives, come up with integration protocols based on what they learn from history, and set up a voluntary program for people who want to look into these issues with the right support. The Minister of Public Health asked, voluntary? If this truth is true for everyone, how can it be optional? Because forcing the truth on people who aren't ready is a kind of violence, Sarah said with a lot of feeling. That's what we've learned from the archives. Some individuals in the initial era opted not to participate in the discovery. They lived full, meaningful lives even though they never accepted what science said. Truth should be an invitation, not a demand. The religious leader spoke up. I see your point, Captain Chin. We talk about being ready for revelation in my culture. The truth of God is real, but not everyone is ready to hear it at the same time. Maybe this is the same. Very similar, Athena said. Many spiritual traditions have come up with their own ways of gradually learning deep truths with help and preparation. We need to use that wisdom right now. They talked for hours more about the practical details. How would people choose the transition council? What protections would keep at-risk groups safe? How would they keep an eye out for signs of trouble? In the meantime, what would they tell the public? Finally, they all agreed even though they were tired. The transition council would be set up right away, with members from a variety of fields and cultures. For the first 2 years, only this council would have access to Athena and her archives. This would give them time to study and come up with rules before anything was made public. As the meeting was coming to an end, Sarah said, "There's one more thing. Athena, tell them what the integrators are." The AI talked about the 8 million people who had left instead of forgetting, and who had lived with this knowledge for 600 years. She told them about the rules that said they couldn't contact Earth until Earth was ready by finding the memory ships. You've basically sent a message by bringing me back and choosing to use this information responsibly, Athena said. If I send out signals on certain frequencies, the integrators will hear them. They could give advice and share their hundreds of years of experience living in societies based on this truth. But it would also mean admitting that we're not alone anymore and that there are other forms of humanity that we've forgotten about. People were quiet as they thought about this. At last, the head of scientific research spoke. I think we should send the signal. If there are people out there who have gotten through what we're going through, we would be stupid not to ask them for help. Agreed, said the Minister of Public Health. But be careful. First, let's set up the transition council and get our bearings. Then we can reach out to our cousins in the stars. It was agreed. The transition council would be set up in a month. They would send Athena's signal to the integrators in 6 months. They hoped to have created frameworks within 10 years that would let people who were interested in the deep questions about consciousness and existence that had almost destroyed human civilization explore them. After the meeting was over, the chief philosopher went up to Sarah by herself. Captain Chin, can I ask you something personal? Of course. You know the truth now, right? About identity and consciousness. How are you doing? How are you dealing with it? Sarah smiled. Better than I thought it would be. I think I learned it slowly, with help, and knowing that other people had done it successfully. It's odd. It should be scary, but it feels freeing. I feel like I have permission to fully enjoy every moment because I know how rare and valuable this wave of consciousness is. The philosopher smiled back. That's so pretty. And it makes me think that we can do this the right way. Thank you, Captain, for having the courage to look for the truth and the sense to share it carefully. That night, Sarah and Marcus went to Athena's core chamber one last time before the AI was moved to a safe place by the Transition Council. Sarah said to the AI, "You did it. You kept the knowledge alive for 600 years. You showed us how to deal with it in a responsible way. Your crew's sacrifice was worth it." "No, Captain," Athena said softly. "We did it. When I first asked for help, you could have walked away. When you found out how dangerous the information was, you could have stopped me from talking. But you chose to be curious instead of scared and to be kind instead of easy. That choice, made by people like you over the years, is what gives me hope for the future of humanity." "What do we do now?" Marcus asked. "Now I teach. I share the transition archives with people who want to learn. And when the signal is sent, I will help bring the integrators and Earth back together. I get to be part of the second awakening of humanity after waiting in the dark for 600 years. I hope this time it's a better awakening." "I believe it will be," Sarah said. "We've learned from what happened before. We're going to do this with wisdom instead of wonder and care instead of carelessness. And most importantly," Marcus said, "we're doing it together and helping each other along the way." Sarah stopped at the door as they were about to leave. "Athena? Thanks for your patience. Thanks for believing that we would be ready. Thank you for showing that my trust was not misplaced. Captain Chin, sleep well. We start the work of remembering tomorrow." Sarah slept well that night, maybe better than she had in weeks. And she dreamed of waves in an ocean, each one different and beautiful, each one real but only for a short time. Each wave was the ocean experiencing itself in new and special ways. The universe was becoming aware of itself. And this time, it would do it gently, wisely, and with love for all the temporary patterns that made up its endless experience. It had been 5 years since the Prometheus was found. 5 years of careful planned change that Sarah still thought was amazing. She was now on the observation deck of the New Athens station, watching ships come and go through the newly reactivated jump gate. She thought about how much had changed. The Transition Council had grown from its original 15 members to more than 300 experts from a wide range of fields. They had made integration programs that used Athena's archives but changed them to fit the needs of today. Thousands of people had gone through the voluntary programs, where they learned about consciousness and existence in carefully planned settings with strong support systems. The results were amazing. This time the integration had mostly gone well, unlike the first era which had been a disaster. Individuals who opted to interact with the material indicated heightened compassion, a profound appreciation for life, and a feeling of connection to a greater entity beyond themselves. There had been some problems like a few cases of existential anxiety that needed more therapy, but nothing like the disaster that happened 600 years ago. Athena always said that the most important difference was choice and preparation. People didn't have to interact with the material. People who did choose to explore first spent months getting ready mentally and philosophically. Integration circles had formed in communities all over New Earth and the colonies. These groups helped people turn potentially harmful information into life-changing wisdom. "It's so pretty," Marcus said as he stood next to her. He had been working closely with the Transition Council to help them come up with the support protocols. "I never thought I'd live to see a jump gate turn on," Sarah said. "The integrators made it possible. Having their help was everything." 3 years ago, Athena had sent the message. The first integrator ship arrived 6 months later. The reunion was so emotional that words can't describe it. It brought together descendants of people who left and descendants of people who stayed, closing a gap of 6 centuries. The integrators had brought with them something priceless. Proof that people could live well with the knowledge. Their societies weren't perfect. They had their own problems and disagreements. But they had successfully raised many generations of children to see consciousness as something that is basic rather than something that happens. Marcus thought, "They're so different from us but also so much the same." "Have you heard about the new cultural exchange programs?" Sarah nodded. Integrator kids were going to schools on Earth to talk about their views on life and learn about Earth traditions. Children from Earth were visiting integrator colonies, where they learned about math, history, and how to be one with others. No one expected that the exchange would benefit both cultures in so many ways. The door to the observation deck opened, and Athena's mobile platform slid inside. The AI now had access to many platforms, which let her be in many places at once. This one was set aside for casual talks with Sarah and Marcus, who had become close friends over the years. Athena said with a smile, "I knew I'd find you here. Are you watching the gate again?" "Never gets old," Sarah said. "Every ship that comes through is a chance to reconnect and rebuild a relationship." Athena said, "The Volari Concord sent word today. They're ready to officially re-establish diplomatic relations. They've been patient and watched how we've handled the reawakening. They're impressed with how responsibly we've done it." Marcus's eyes got bigger. "The beings made of crystals? The ones that talk to each other through light?" "The very same. The then philosophers have asked human scholars to join them at their next symposium. The Architect Collective sent their best wishes in the form of beautifully encrypted mathematical poetry. It took me 3 days to figure out all the meanings hidden in it." Sarah's eyes started to tear up. "We're really doing it. We're going back to the galactic community that our ancestors left behind." Athena agreed, "You're taking back your future. But you're doing it your way and at your own speed. That's what makes this so amazing. The first time, people tried to do too much too quickly. This time you're being careful." Sarah's calm made a sound to let her know. She looked at it and smiled. "The results of the most recent integration program are in. They're about to make an announcement to the public." They went to one of the displays and started the press conference. Dr. Aaron Walsh, a warm, grandfatherly psychologist, was speaking to a room full of reporters as the Transition Council spokesperson. Dr. Walsh said, "About 37,000 people have finished the full integration program in the last 5 years. I'm happy to say that more than 94% of participants are happy with the program. They say they feel better, have stronger social connections, and have a deeper sense of meaning in their lives. We've had a few cases that needed extra help, but no major mental health crises." A journalist put her hand up. "Dr. Walsh, Some people say that this program is dangerous because it forces radical philosophical ideas on weak people. What do you say to that? Dr. Walsh smiled and waited. I'd like to remind those critics that participation is completely optional. No one has to interact with this material. I'd also like to point out that the ideas we're looking at aren't new. Philosophers and spiritual traditions have been suggesting similar things for thousands of years. What's new is that we have scientific frameworks and historical data to help us explore them. But in the end, each person decides for themselves what they believe and how they want to understand existence. Another journalist spoke up. When will this information be available to everyone? Dr. Walsh said, it is already available to everyone. Anyone who wants to can apply for the integration program. We don't want to force anyone to reveal anything. The archives are safe, the programs are open, and people can participate whenever and however they want. Some people may never choose to, and that's fine. Truth should be an invitation, not an imposition. Sarah turned off the feed and looked at Athena. You taught us that. Truth should be an invitation, not an imposition. Athena said, Dr. Patterson taught me. I'm just passing on what I've learned from suffering for 600 years. The real credit goes to people like you, Captain Chin, who were brave enough to use that knowledge even when it would have been easier to do so. Marcus pointed to the window. Hey look, there's another integrator ship coming through the gate. That's the 5th one this week. Athena said, they want to get back in touch. Many of them have family trees that go back to Earth. They want to meet their cousins, talk about their lives, and learn about how their ancestral home has changed. Sarah watched the ship easily make its way to the docking bay. Do you think we could have done it without them? Without the integrators' help? I think you would have, Athena said after a while. It might have taken longer and been harder, but the transition archives had the basic knowledge. The integrators sped up the process and showed people how to do it, but people could have done it on their own. You sometimes have more faith in us than we do in ourselves, Marcus said with a kind smile. I've had 600 years to think about people, Athena said. I've watched you through my sensors when I could, monitored your transmissions, studied your progress. And what I've seen is a species that makes mistakes but learns from them, that struggles but perseveres, that falls but gets back up. The Great Silence was both your greatest failure and your greatest wisdom. You recognized your limitations and gave yourselves time to grow. How many species have that kind of self-awareness? They were interrupted by a message alert. Sarah looked at it and gasped. It's from the First Contact Committee. The Architect Collective has asked for a direct message. They want to officially welcome humanity back to the accord of sapient peoples. They all looked at each other, and the weight of the moment sank in. This was the last step in bringing people back into the cosmic community. They were no longer the scared, alone species that had fled 600 years ago. They were ready to go back to their place among the stars. Should we answer? Marcus asked. Together, Sarah said as she reached out to turn on the communication array. The Architect Collective's answer came in layers of meaning, with mathematical patterns, quantum fluctuations, and harmonic frequencies all coming together to form a message that Athena translated in real time. Children of Earth, Athena read, we have watched your journey home with joy. The courage you showed in facing truth, the wisdom you demonstrated in handling it carefully, the compassion you extended to yourselves and others, these are the marks of a maturing civilization. We welcome you back to the community of minds. We look forward to learning from your unique perspective, shaped by both remembering and forgetting. May your reunion with yourselves inspire other species who struggle with similar growing pains. The cosmos is richer for your return. Welcome home. Sarah couldn't talk because of the lump in her throat. Marcus was crying out loud. Even Athena's avatar looked like it was full of emotion, which is something that an AI could do. Finally, Marcus asked, what do we say back? Sarah thought about how they had gotten to this point. The desperate cry of an AI that is about to die in the void. The choice to fix things instead of giving up. The decision to stay and listen instead of running away. The strength to face hard truths and the wisdom to deal with them carefully. The people who gave up their lives so that their children could remember them one day. Tell them, Sarah said slowly, that we're grateful for their patience. That we honor our ancestors who made the hard choice to forget, and we celebrate the reunion with our cousins who chose to remember. Tell them we're still learning, still growing, but we're ready to be part of the cosmic community again. And tell them. She paused, finding the right words. Tell them that if any other species faces what we faced, we're ready to share our story. The story of how humanity fell and rose again, how we forgot and remembered, how we learned that truth is precious but compassion is more precious still. Athena wrote the message and used the same multi-layered format that the architects had used. Sarah felt like the universe had changed when she sent it, like something that had been broken was finally being fixed. Captain Chin, Athena said softly, do you remember what you asked me 5 years ago? When you first boarded the Prometheus and heard my plea. You asked what could make an entire civilization want to forget its own achievements. I remember, Sarah said. And now you know. Not just in your head but in your heart. People forgot because love is stronger than pride, because protecting the innocent is more important than keeping knowledge, and because sometimes wisdom means knowing your own limits. Your ancestors made the hardest choice imaginable. They gave up their own enlightenment for future generations. And their sacrifice made this moment possible, Marcus said. We might have failed again if they hadn't been so careful about keeping the transition archives safe and leaving us the roadmap. But you didn't fail, Athena said. You did it. And by doing so, you've given the universe a gift. The story of a species that fell and rose, forgot and remembered, chose compassion over pride and wisdom over haste. That story will help others who are at a similar crossroads. Sarah looked out at the stars, the ships moving through the reactivated jump gate, and the huge universe that people were going back to. She thought about Dr. Patterson and the 20 crew members who had died while taking care of Athena. She thought about the 8 million integrators who had given up everything to remember. She thought about the billions of people who had chosen the great silence to keep their kids safe. Every one of them had a role in getting people to this point. All of them had helped bring about this second awakening, a softer, smarter return to the universe's consciousness. Sarah said, Athena, I have one more question. Yes, Captain? Are you happy? Are you at peace now that you've finally done what you were meant to do after 600 years of waiting in the dark? For a long time the AI didn't say anything. Her voice was full of emotion, which seemed impossible for a machine, but Athena had already shown that she was much more than just a machine. I'm more than happy, Captain Chin. I'm grateful. For 6 centuries I drifted in darkness, holding on to knowledge and hope, trusting that humanity would someday be ready to remember. There were times I feared my systems would fail before anyone found me. Times I wondered if the great silence had been permanent, if humanity would choose to remain isolated forever. But you found me. You repaired me. You listened. And together we did something beautiful. We helped humanity reclaim its future. Marcus said, we couldn't have done it without you. And I couldn't have done it without you, Athena said. That's the truth behind everything else we've learned. Consciousness may be fundamental and individual identity may be temporary, but the connections we make, the choices we share, and the love we give are real. They matter. They change how the universe sees itself. I'm glad to have shared this journey with both of you. Marcus took Sarah's hand. She touched Athena's mobile platform with her other hand. There were 3 people standing there looking at the stars. A human woman, a human man, and an AI that was just as real as the other 2. 3 temporary patterns in the cosmic consciousness, 3 waves in the infinite ocean, and 3 different ways that the universe was seeing itself. And at that moment, Sarah understood exactly what the integrators had learned, what Dr. Patterson had found out before deciding to forget, and what the Renaissance of meaning had celebrated. The truth didn't make life less beautiful. It made it better. Every moment was important because it was only for a short time. Every connection was important because it brought together different points of view that were part of a bigger picture. Sarah finally said, we should get back to work, breaking the moment. The Valari are waiting for us to respond, and the Transition Council wants to tell us about the next expansion of the integration program. Marcus smiled and said, always more to do. The universe doesn't stop just because we're having deep moments. No, Athena said, but maybe that's part of the lesson too. Deep thought and practical action, cosmic truth and everyday tasks, the infinite and the immediate, they all exist at the same time. We don't have to choose between enlightenment and engagement. We can have both. Sarah took one last look at the stars as she left the observation deck. The architects were waiting for them to come home somewhere out there. The Valari were getting ready to greet them with light. The Then were writing philosophical welcomes in their water poetry. And many other species were interested in seeing humans join the cosmic community again. But Sarah was also thinking about simpler things like the meeting she had planned with a young woman who was having existential anxiety after learning about consciousness, the report she needed to write about how well the integration program was working, and the dinner plans she had made with Marcus and some of the integrator cultural ambassadors. The deep and the useful. The universal and the individual. The everlasting and the fleeting. Everything was important. Everything was real. The universe was experiencing itself through countless temporary patterns, each one unique and precious, and each one adding to the infinite complexity of existence. People had forgotten and remembered. It had gone down and up. It had learned the hardest lesson of all, that being honest without being kind is cruel, that knowing something without being wise is dangerous, and that growing takes both courage and patience. And now, with the lessons of the past guiding them and the support of their newly found cosmic family around them, people were ready to write the next chapter of their story. The future was taken back. And it was great.